So far, we've just been working with code, but before we move any further, we should explore the design of our website. Just to serve as a reminder, this is what our project will look like when it's done. When you're creating projects on your own, the design won't be done for you like it is in this case. So it's important that we walk through some of the design decisions here and understand them. The design process from one site to another will always vary, but for our purposes, we can break things down like this. First, we're going to decide on goals, then we'll list out the page elements, and finally, we'll lay out the pages with shapes. I'm going to work through the design on paper, and I strongly encourage you to follow along. First, we should decide on an overall goal for our site. In these lessons, this website will be a design portfolio with the goal of booking new work. However, there will be many opportunities along the way for you to customize this website for your own needs. For example, your site's goal might be to showcase your arts and crafts, or perhaps you want to create a gallery of photos to share with your family and friends. Once you've decided on your own goal, we should list out the page elements we'll need. For this website, we'll need an image gallery, an about page, and a contact page. We'll also need a simple header with a title and navigation. Often this site-wide header is called top-level navigation. We'll also need a site footer. This image gallery will showcase our work. The About page will provide some context for the website as a whole and tell the visitor more information, and then the Contact page will give the visitor a way to get in touch. This is especially important for a design portfolio where we're trying to get new work. With our list in hand, let's quickly lay out our 3-page website. We're going to use a technique called wireframing to lay out the shapes and visual structure of our site. This is a much faster way to experiment with site layout before you spend lots of time writing code. We're also going to design the mobile version of the site and then work our way up to more complex layouts. I'm going to lay out our gallery as a grid with 2 images in each row. Underneath each image will be a short caption that gives the image some context. This layout will allow us enough room to make the images large so they command a lot of attention. Now let's lay out the contact page and about page. Both of these pages are pretty simple, so they can follow the same basic layout. We'll create a single column and stack everything because mobile sites don't really have enough room for too many columns, but they're great at scrolling. In the case of our About page, we'll add a photo and a paragraph about ourselves. For the Contact page, we'll write a paragraph describing how best to reach us, along with details like an email address, phone number, and Twitter account. That's about it for the mobile site. Now let's take these same pages and make them work for tablets and desktops. We have a lot more width to work with here, so I'm going to spread apart the logo text and the navigation in the header. Then on the gallery page, I'm going to break up my 2 columns into 3 columns. Finally, on our About page and Contact page, I'm going to create 2 columns and give our page elements a little bit more room to breathe. Looks good. Our quick wireframes are pretty much done. If we were building a more complex website, we might want to take things further and build high-fidelity mockups in an image editing tool like Photoshop. However, this is a simple website, and as we build it in HTML and CSS, we can fill in the details along the way. With our wireframes in hand, we're ready to block out the basic structure of our website. Over the last few years, new HTML elements have become available along with several new technologies. Collectively, these new elements and technologies are referred to as HTML5. Now, this might imply a new version of HTML, but it's a little bit of a misnomer. I'm just telling you this now so that when you hear other web designers and developers use the term HTML5, you don't get confused. All it really means are some new HTML elements that weren't available previously, along with a few new pieces of browser technology. Now, let's get coding. First, let's get rid of these style tags. I'm going to highlight this entire area and press the delete key. We don't need them because we'll add style later on. We'll hold on to our headline because we will still need it later. Every web page has to start with what's called a document type, or doc type for short. And it looks like this. You start out with an opening angle bracket, an exclamation point, the word doc type in all capital letters, a space, the word HTML in lowercase letters, and then a closing angle bracket. There's no closing tag, and this tag also won't create anything that's visible on the page. There are many other tags like this that only serve structural purposes and are not actually visible to the site visitor. This doc type basically tells the browser that this is an HTML document and that's how it should be interpreted. The doc type should always be the first thing on the page, and it should always be at the top without any space before it. Now, let's create an HTML element. Of course, everything that we'll be creating here is an HTML element, but this element is actually called HTML. This will serve as the root of our document structure, and similar to the doc type, it won't be visible to visitors. I'm going to wrap our headline with the HTML tags and then indent it so that I can easily see that it's nested. To do this, I'm going to highlight our H1 element. I'm going to cut it by hitting Command X on a Mac or Control X on Windows. Then I'm going to click inside of our HTML element, create some space, then I'm going to paste it by hitting Command V on a Mac or Control V on Windows. Then I'm going to go to the beginning of the line and hit Tab to indent it. One way you can go quickly from the beginning to the end of a line, or vice versa, is by holding down the Command key and using the arrows if you're on a Mac, or hitting Control and the arrows if you're on Windows. So for example, on my Mac here, I can hit Command and right arrow to go to the end of the line, or Command and left arrow to go to the beginning of the line. This handy tip will help you navigate text more quickly. Now we're ready to add two more elements to our page, which are the head element and the body element. Both of these need to go inside of our HTML element. I'm going to type head, and I'm just going to leave that right above our H1. I'm going to go to the end of the line and create a new line, and then I'm going to type a body element. Once again, our H1 element needs to go inside of the body, and in this case, I'm going to use a new keyboard shortcut to actually highlight this body element. To do this on a Mac, you can hit Command Shift and then the arrow key, depending on the direction that you want to highlight. To do this on Windows, you just hit Control Shift and then the direction you want to highlight. So on my Mac, with my insertion point in between the two tags, I'm going to hit Command Shift and then right arrow to highlight it, Command X to cut it. I'm going to go to the end of the line here and paste in that body tag. And then I'm going to indent this line just like that. That way I'll know my H1 is nested inside of my body, which is also nested inside of my HTML. At this point, you're probably starting to see why indentation is so important. When you have a much larger HTML file, as we will later on, it's important to use indentation so that you can see how elements are nested inside of one another. Now let's talk about these two elements that we just added. The head element will contain what's called meta information about our document. which again won't be visible to site visitors. However, it will contain important information like CSS, which will modify the visuals later on. The head element is not the same thing as the website header we wireframed earlier. I know that's a little bit confusing right now, but don't worry, we'll explain the difference soon. The body element, which we typed right here, will contain the rest of our website content. In other words, this is the body of the document. Once again, I've indented my headline element further because it's 2 levels deep here inside of HTML and body. Now, let's jump inside of the head and hit enter to create some space. Hit tab to indent our code. And then let's type a title for our website. I'm going to write my name, followed by a space, and a vertical pipe, which you can type by hitting Shift and the / key, then another space, and I'm going to type the word designer, because this website is going to be my design portfolio. You might want to put something else, like photographer or expert cupcake baker. The title tag usually appears in browser tabs, so you know what website you're visiting. It will also appear in search engine result pages. Now, let's add the character set for the page, just above the title. That will look like this. We'll type the word meta, followed by charset, an equal sign, and then 2 double quotes. Inside of the double quotes, we're going to type UTF dash and the number 8. And finally, we need to close our meta tag. This code looks a little bit intimidating, but don't let it scare you. It's simply telling the browser how our web page is formatted and what types of characters are used. Similar to the doc type, it's not visible to the site visitor. It also doesn't have a closing tag. Inside of this meta tag, you'll notice we've used some new syntax. We have a word followed by an equal sign, which is then followed by a value wrapped in double quotes. This is called an attribute. Attributes are extra information inside of an HTML tag that provides key information to the browser about how the page is built. We'll learn more about how to use attributes on many other elements, but for now, let's focus on what this attribute means. The literal translation here is that the character set, or charset, should be UTF-8, or Universal Character Set Transformation Format 8-bit. Don't worry about memorizing that. In fact, I even had to look it up, and I've been making websites for more than a decade. Again, it just describes how our page is formatted. Now, let's dig into the body element and add some real page structure. I'm going to jump into the body and type a header tag, and then I'm going to put our H1 inside of the header. Just below the header, I'm going to create a section element, and then below that, I'm going to create a footer. One thing you'll notice about workspaces is that if you type enough of the element that you're trying to create, it will auto-complete it for you. If I type some of the element here and then hit enter, it will automatically complete the rest of the element name. If I then close the tag, it will add the closing tag for me. Again, this is just more code completion that allows you to type faster by typing less. Now, I've added 3 new elements here: the header element, the section element, and the footer element. This provides the basic structure for our site content. Let's go through each one of these new elements. The header element is different than the head element that we added earlier. The head element is just for the web browser to read metadata about the HTML document. This new header element is actually a part of the site's content and helps structure the information that we're displaying to site visitors. Inside of it, we have the first level headline that we created earlier, and I've made sure to continue indenting properly. Now, before we move on to the section and footer, let's add a second level headline that matches the title we created earlier. The headline will be slightly smaller than our first level headline when it's rendered on our web page. So after my first level headline, I'm going to type H2, and then inside of that, I'm going to type designer. Now, this section element will soon contain our image gallery. Sections, just as the name implies, break up a page into logical groupings of information, just like sections of a newspaper. We're not ready to build our gallery just yet, but let's add a temporary placeholder paragraph so that when we preview the page, we'll know where this section appears. So, inside of my section, I'm going to type a paragraph element, and I'm going to say gallery will go here. The footer element is a complement to the header element. Here we can put things like copyright information or social media links. Similar to the header, this is a good place to put information that we want to feature on every page. Unlike the header, this information isn't really important enough to put at the top of the page, so we're de-emphasizing it by putting it at the bottom. Let's add a paragraph that contains copyright information. So inside of my footer here, I'm going to create a new paragraph, and you'll notice that when I hit enter to open up a tag, Workspaces automatically indents for me. I didn't have to type tab there. Now let's create our paragraph. So I'm going to type a paragraph element, or p tag there. And we're going to use some special code here, and I'm going to type it out, then explain it. So I'm going to type an ampersand. So I'll hit Shift and then the number 7 on my keyboard for ampersand. Then I'm going to type the word copy, followed by a semicolon. And you can see in the code completion there that Workspaces provides what that might do. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Then after my semicolon there, I'm going to type a space. I'm going to type 2014. And I'm going to type Nick Pettit, followed by a period. This special syntax that we typed is a character that doesn't appear on our keyboard. In fact, it is the copyright character. So we need to type what's called an HTML entity to make it appear. There are lots of HTML entities like this, but there's no need to memorize them. Most web designers and developers just go to a search engine when they need to look them up. In the notes for this video, you'll find a link that lists them out for you. The syntax follows the pattern of an ampersand, followed by the name of the symbol, and then a semicolon. So you can go ahead and type an ampersand here, and Workspaces will automatically generate a list of HTML entities for you to choose from. As you can see, there are quite a lot of them, but if you go ahead and continue typing, it will narrow down the list as you type. but we don't need a second special character there, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. Now, let's save our web page, and we're going to preview it. However, before we open the preview window, I want you to try and visualize what you think the page will look like. Now, let's open it up. Does the page look like what you were expecting? Right now, it's pretty underwhelming. It's just a white background and some black text, and only the most basic default styling that's been applied automatically by the browser. We're going to add lots more life to this page with CSS, but first, we need to finish up the content. One thing I would like you to notice right now, though, is the sequence of the content. From the top down to the bottom, our page has a header with our name, followed by a second-level headline that we've made. Then this section with the content inside, which right now is just a temporary paragraph, followed by the footer down at the bottom. This is exactly the same order that our elements appear in our code. In other words, we can't just put things into our HTML randomly. It should appear in the order that we would like it to appear on the page, starting from the top left corner and working our way down the page. We just covered a lot of new HTML elements, including the doc type, the HTML element, meta element, title element, head and body elements, and the header, section, and footer elements. Before we continue, let's take a quick code challenge to make sure that you've mastered this important information.